Hello, BookTube. Recently, this channel reached 11,000 subscribers, which had quite a few poking fun at me about how I'm getting close to BroTube territory. That isn't true, because A, BroTube channels tend to start at around 50,000 subscribers, and B, this channel is never going to reach 50,000 subscribers. I don't care how cute Frida is. It's never going to happen. There aren't that many real readers who are aware that YouTube exists, much less watching BookTube on a regular basis. Now, I think we're going to top out at around 11,000. So the BroTube slurs are uncalled for, but I called for questions. And as usual, I got a barrage of fantastic questions. So we're going to do that until we run out of questions. I've got them on the iPad here, and that's what I'll be looking down at. And as usual, I want to just offer a couple of caveats. Number one is that I'm going to cut these off at 30-minute intervals so that the video isn't 3 hours long. And two is that I copy the questions over from YouTube, which has a whole bunch of junk involved, when it was last edited, how many days ago it is, all that sort of stuff, plus icons. I copy all that over and paste it into a Google document. And there's a chance there that questions could get lost. So if your question got lost, it's not intentional, just ask it again. But anyway, we're going to start off right away with part one. We'll start with Mary Tumulty, who says, has the management of the Brattle Bookshop ever shared with you the percentage of their customers who say Steve sent me while completing their transactions? For those of you who are new to the channel, might not know what Mary's talking about. She's talking about a used bookstore in Boston, the Brattle Bookshop, which is great. I love it. I have been an enthusiastic patron there for a long time, half a century. And in answer to the question, I don't know how many people have said Steve sent me, but I know for sure that it's happened many times that people have gone into the Brattle and said, you know, I learned about this place, or I'm here because of Steve Donoghue, only to be told that I was there earlier that same day and that they missed me. That can happen. I've also been at the Brattle more than a few times when people have come up to me, either in the shop or in the sale lot outside, and said, you know, asked me the kind of silly question that you ask with someone that you've seen in a visual medium of some kind, but never in person. They will ask me the silly question of, are you Steve Donoghue? When they know perfectly well that I am, or they wouldn't have approached me in the first place. And I am dismayed by the fact that I've heard reports over the years of people who didn't do that because they were worried about bothering me. Good Lord. But Steve sent me, I don't know how many times that's happened. It could be that it's happened a lot more often than I think, and that the Brattle staff just doesn't think to mention it to me when I'm in there. Let's see here. Logan Mortensen says, congrats on 11K. Number one, what is your take on the biting incidents involving President Biden's dog? He's a high-spirited dog. And the bites weren't, as far as I know, all that serious. I think it probably couldn't end up being some sort of problem, but you have to know I'm going to side with the dog here, right? You have to know that. I've seen ample evidence, ample footage of this dog, and the dog, to me, doesn't seem excitable or high-strung or unpredictable in any way. So I'd be willing to bet that the incidents were provoked. Might not, you know, not in the sense of growling or throwing things at the dog, but with larger dogs, especially visually oriented, basically herding or guarding dogs, a provoking action can be an unwanted gesture towards the face, or a quick or unexpected move towards something that the dog values, including people. I more often than not, with bigger German Shepherd type dogs, it has been my experience that the human is at fault. Right? But you knew I was going to say that anyway. Number two, what do you consider to be your life's greatest achievement thus far? I've mentioned this before in a couple of videos. I'm just going to have to go with dogs. I know that's kind of boring, but I'm going to have to go with dogs. I have made a strong effort in the whole course of my life to provide not only friendship and understanding to dogs who aren't mine, but also to provide a loving home for dogs that I take into my home. Usually that's many dogs, a little crowd of them. Then it went to 2, and now it's only one. It's only been the times when I've only ever had one dog at one time have been very rare. But I'm going to have to use that as my greatest accomplishment. Although it was a pleasure. It's always been a pleasure, so it feels a little weird, but one way or another. Laura Wincello says, congrats on 11K. Number one, have you ever smooshed with a cat? Not on the face. I don't think I have the courage to do that. But I have canoodled with a cat on a couple of different occasions, including an old used bookstore in Boston called the Boston Book Annex that had just these Warren-y type rooms squared off from each other, low ceilings, awkward steps, exposed piping, that sort of thing. And sometimes when I had time, I would be in those little rooms, and I would be down. If there were shelves right by the floor, I would sit on the floor to examine those shelves. Sometimes they were double stacked, so I really wanted to sit there. I would just cross my legs and sit there to sort of examine those bottom books. And a couple of different times at the Boston Book Annex, the shop's cat would wander into view, walk up into the declivity inside of my crossed legs, and just sort of settle in for a nap. And I would often canoodle with that cat when that happened. Question number 2, were you the only one of your Sainted Ma's children to be socialized by dogs? Yes. Would you recommend this education to prospective parents? No, I would not. It can be dangerous. Very dangerous. Let's see. Ingrid Fitz says, oh my goodness, Frida overlooking this announcement. Yes, she's overlooking the answers as well. She's staring out at her little kingdom. And she's staring out at prefab boxy condos that were built on a field that used to be directly across the street from Hyde Cottage. There used to be a field that ran half the length of this road. Wild grass, trees, an unobstructed view of the wooded hills beyond, and then the city sold that land, and a row of condos went up, blocking my view, but filling the neighborhood with new dogs. But anyway, my question is, do you ever donate books back to the Brattle, or do you have a specific place you like to donate books when you need to unhaul? Well, I don't donate books back to the Brattle. I sell them back to the Brattle. I always have a Brattle pile going on the kitchen floor. They just come out and box it up, make a little small talk, and then hit the road again. Or I'd be up to my eyeballs in books if I didn't do that. And it's always for store credit. I just plow it right back into the Brattle. But yeah, there are always a contingent of books that I can't, in good conscience, sell to the Brattle. They're just into rotten shape, or they're falling apart or whatever. Those I typically don't bother with. I'm not going to donate junk anywhere else. But if some of those are in good condition, I have a friend who runs a church here in Boston, so sometimes we'll donate books to him, and I sell lots of books back just in a constant circular motion to the Brattle. And there's also quite a few books that I get that I like to give away. But yeah, you have to keep the key to having peace of mind with accumulating books is that you have to be constantly getting rid of them as well. Let's see here. Connor says, how do you think the breadth and depth of your reading changes your experience on BookTube compared to us mere mortals? Changes my experience on BookTube. That's an odd way to put it. I don't think that it does. I think it probably it might. The raw experience, just the raw materials of my breadth and depth of reading might change my experience on BookTube for the worse if I were a condescending type of person. Then it might. Because, just realistically speaking, and I can say this because I'm not a condescending person, just realistically speaking, most people on BookTube have not read as much as I have. And most people on BookTube are reading books that I have already read. So my experience on BookTube is much, much more getting to know a person through their videos and then watching them hold up a book and saying, okay, tell me what you thought of that book, rather than, tell me about that book, if you see the difference. I'm not usually going to BookTube channels to learn about anything. I'm going about the books. I'm going to learn about your reaction to what you're reading. But that if that reflects the breadth and depth of my reading experience, that only makes it a better viewing experience. It makes it more interesting for me because I know what you're talking about. Let's see here. Link Joker has a barrage of questions. Number one, thoughts on Jim Young's Condor Heroes of the series. I just love it. Love it. In fact, I like it more as it goes along. Uh, so in case you're wondering, I don't know, the angle here is allowing you to see that condo across the street. In case you're wondering if maybe it's the fidelity of the camera, no, it's not. The builders of these condos decided to color them crap brown and pea yellow. Could have been bright blue. Would have cost the same thing. But they made them crap brown and pea yellow. They look like prisons. Anyway, let's go on with your questions. Number two, thoughts on Farmer's World of Tears series. I like it. It's gimmicky. It's not good in the sense of, prose or depth or anything. It's pure adventure, but I like them. And despite that description, I might be due for a reread. And if I am due for a reread, I know exactly what I want. There used to be 2 box sets with the, who was it? Mark Richardson would know. Is it Boris Vallejo's covers? Who did the covers for the World of Tears series that I'm talking about? Well, one way or another, I would want those, and I would want the box sets of the mass market paperbacks from an eon ago. I don't want to be shouting over a siren. They're going to happen quite a bit during this Q&A. I want those box sets. I don't want the books individually. I don't want the hardcovers. I don't want any ugly later trade paperbacks. Those are the ones I want. And if I ever find those box sets, that will be my signal that it's time to reread these. Number 3, what aspects of writing fiction do you most struggle with? Plot, very much so. Which is why in my fiction writing, I have usually gravitated towards either plots that already exist. So my trilogy, for instance, about Greek mythology, the plots already existed. I didn't have to worry about that. Or plots that are so mechanical in nature that I don't have to worry about them. I can think about other things. But plotting something out of thin air, without any of that, it's a weak spot. I've been working on it, but it's a weak spot. And the way I've been working on it is to try and write more mystery / thriller / police procedural, because those rely on a Loctite plot. So I've been forcing myself to write more of those things in order to get better at it, but it's still a weak spot, definitely. And question number 4, what aspect do you feel you excel most at? I'm pretty good with dialogue, and I'm pretty good with action scenes too, which is a hard thing to do. I've had to work real hard to get as good as I am at action scenes, and I could get a lot better. James Holder said, how are your writing projects coming? Camp NaNoWriMo, collected reviews, etc. Well, not as good as they could be. They're not coming as good as they could be, because the beginning of April was really rocky for me. It basically put pretty much everything except Frida on hold. So, for instance, I have not returned to Camp NaNoWriMo. I started my project there, got a good count done, but I'm nowhere near my goal. I can still reach my goal by the end of April. I really need to go back to Camp NaNoWriMo at the end of this weekend. There are a couple of deadlines that are immovable for this weekend that have to be done. And the collected reviews the same way. I'm beetling away at it, but the goal of getting a 1,000-page book or 500-page book done in 2021, I want that to happen so bad. But there's a huge amount of new prose that needs to be written. It's not just collecting those old reviews. I'm adding a huge amount of new prose. Let's see here. Nicholas Jaramillo says, Steve, saw your John Keats Letters Daily Penguin Daily Classic. You commented that if Keats had lived, he would have eclipsed Shakespeare. Do you mind saying a word or two more? So refreshing to hear someone speak of Shakespeare without the drooling bardolatry. Well, I'm just going by the numbers. Keats was extremely young when he died, and yet we venerate him justly for having written a ton of toweringly brilliant work. It stands to reason that if he'd kept going, unless he stalled out, like I would say Wordsworth did, unless he stalled out, it stands to reason that he would have become the greatest poet in the English language. And if that's a discussion question, then do you have any Keats biographies that you would recommend? I've read them all. Nicholas Rowe is fantastic. Andrew Motion is fantastic. But probably W. Jackson Bate is still my favorite. It's I think the oldest of those 3, but it's I think the deepest, the smartest. So the Bate biography would probably still be my favorite. No idea if any of those are still in print. But the Bate biography has had a long print history. The hardcover was a hit. The hardcover was reprinted a bunch of times. There are a bunch of paperbacks, so you should be able to find that one. Or a favorite poem. I'm assuming you have a favorite poem of Keats. For me, rather predictably, it would be Hyperion. P.S. Wanted to say thank you so much for your video about approaching Shakespeare. I read Folger's library edition of Hamlet twice and didn't really enjoy it except for the poetry and the famous soliloquy. Took your advice on approaching Shakespeare and watched the Globe's Hamlet on YouTube. For 2.5 hours, my eyes were glued to the screen. Well, that's what, I mean, Shakespeare shaped some of his dramas later on for the knowledge that they would be watched indoors, and maybe shaped some of his dramas for the knowledge that they would be written down. But very much primarily, these things were written to be watched. When, as good as the poetry is, you are looking through a keyhole if you only experience them that way. So always, if you can, always watch Shakespeare. In fact, my advice, not to slight YouTube at all, is never pass up a chance to see Shakespeare on a live stage, preferably with tickets close enough so that you are right there and can hear the thumping of the feet and the breathing and the sotto voce backstage whispering. Get right up close to the stage. Row 5 is ideal. And if you check, well, maybe not now in the pandemic era, but it always used to just break my heart in the pre-pandemic era. How many people, even in small towns, would say, gee, I would love to see a Shakespeare play, but I'm not going to fly to New York. And it used to break my heart to say, your local community theater, I guarantee you, is putting on Shakespeare. There's a community theater putting on Shakespeare somewhere in a 10-minute drive from where you are this season. And they would love your patronage. They would love the $20 for your ticket. That's probably not true anymore, but never pass up an opportunity. I imagine YouTube is a gold mine for watching stuff. Let's see here. PHXSNS1 says, congratulations 11K and pardon the barrage. Okay, we're getting a barrage of questions then. All right. Baby, they're not going to like you being directly behind me. They are. They want to see you a lot more than they want to see me. You should lay down, baby girl, so that you're not... Look at this. She's directly behind me. Okay, well, let's see here. Number 1, what do you think of Joe Lansdale's Hap and Leonard and Max Allan Collins' Quarry series? I've never read the Quarry books, but Hap and Leonard I've read some of them and liked them. Number 2, what do you think of Gone with the Wind and To Kill a Mockingbird? I don't know that they've ever come up on your videos. I like them both. I'm not on the same wavelength that venerates both of them, but I like them both. Scandalous. Absolutely scandalous if I were to say that they're relatively the same. So I won't say that because I don't want to get hashtagged. Number 3, you've spoken about the joy of being part of the literary conversation as a book reviewer. Yes. Yes, the same books are coming out in the same month. Book section editors want to review new releases. They're all looking at relatively the same 3 dozen titles. Every once in a while, a conversation will develop where book section editors, in whose number I am now one of the smallest book section in the country, but still, book section editors will look at those lists, and some of them will seek advice on how to tell a hawk from a handsaw when it comes to that list, and they will put together their roster. And sometimes there will be overlap. Sometimes one particular book will get reviewed by a number of different reviewers. And that is the conversation I'm talking about. And I love that. I absolutely love it. Being a part of that is wonderful. But you had a question, I bet, right? What period in your career or even what specific moment or review made you feel this the strongest? Your Iowa days, Open Letters Monthly, currently, etc. Well, it would have to be currently. Because this is going to sound awful elitist, but it's open to you too with a little work, so it's not as elitist as it could sound. But really, the one element that really is kind of important in joining that conversation is the venue. I mean, I've kept a literary blog for a long time. I'm not slighting blogs at all. And right now, I am an editor at an online literary journal with no paywall. So certainly, second cousin once removed to a literary blog. And I'm not slighting those at all, but the bigger the venue that you can weigh in on in these conversations, which don't happen that often. There's a small conversation every month on a handful of titles, and then every once in a while you'll get a book that will come along that everyone is going to review, like the Philip Roth biography. And in a case like that, or in any other case, a legitimate, sizable venue adds to the thrill. It does. It shouldn't. I know wrong, but because it's a bit gatekeepy, but it adds to the thrill. Certainly, if there is a huge book coming out, let's say there's a huge book coming out in August, a book that I know from years of experience, I can look at a list of August releases and say, okay, these 10 out of 300 are interesting. These 3 out of those 10 are probably going to be worthwhile, and a number I can pretty much predict ahead of time the reviewers who will take them on. But this one book off that August list is going to be that conversation. Everyone is going to review it everywhere from Entertainment Weekly all the way up to the New York Times Book Review, and everybody in between. It's going to garner dozens of reviews. When you come across that title, you really want an audience. It makes me so grateful that I can pitch those things to the Boston Globe or the Christian Science Monitor right here in Boston and get a sort of a so-called seat at that table, which would, if you're going to get that many people weighing in on it, then the smaller your venue, the less chance you'll be part of that conversation when it is represented in blurbs on the paperback. And so the higher up in that audience circulation level you go, the more likely you are to be seen that way, which is an added thrill to the whole procedure. Right now, I have this Open Letters review, which it punches above its weight in terms of blurbs, so it can be on in a number of those different conversations. And I also have Big Canoe News in Northern Georgia, which is a once a month print newspaper. It looks beautiful. I should plug it again. $30 a year gets you a beautiful, full color, big newspaper that, yes, has lots of local news and lots of local ads, but it also has non-local stuff, news coverage, and under my direction, a book section that is all new releases plus a column every month, and that is built. I am building it. I am intending it to be able to go, relative to its weight and size, toe-to-toe with any other book section in the country. It's a little harder to do that when it's such a small venue, especially a little harder to do that when it's once a month instead of once a week, but nevertheless, those two venues, Open Letters Review and Big Canoe News, reach about the same size audience, and they're, no matter how much anybody weighs in on one of these conversations in those reviews, in those venues, it's not going to be noticed all that much. Whereas the Christian Science Monitor, the Boston Globe, the Washington Post, the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, the Baltimore Sun, things like that will be noticed. So I'm not saying that's right, but that's what happens, and I love it. Absolutely love it. I absolutely love that feeling. It doesn't come across often. It doesn't come along often. I think in 2021 it's probably going to happen with 3 books. But when it does, I love it and start going crazy to get somebody to let me write. So anyway, how are we doing for time? Oh, we're fine. All right, Spiro.geek says, Dear Frida's guest star. She has gone, I don't know if you can hear, she's gone down to eat. She decided that she felt like eating a little. I put out a bowl of food, and she just stares at it in the morning. She's not a morning person at all. She doesn't like to walk in the morning, doesn't like to walk around in the morning, doesn't like to go outside in the morning, doesn't like to exercise in the morning, and doesn't even like to eat in the morning. Basically just likes to lounge around in the morning. So this is one of the first dogs I have ever had that did not bolt her food. My beagles were waiting. They were at my ankles and standing up on my legs in the kitchen when I was fixing the food, and bolted it in a frenzy. I was fair. There were splatters on the ceiling. And my girls, Lucy and Malin, were bolters. I put out their food and it was gone in a few minutes. Frida is not a bolter. She will have a little food, then wander away and do something else. Then she'll come back and have a little more food. Anyway, Dear Frida's guest star, which one terrifies you more, hugging a cat or reading a Hemingway novel? Well, I'm not terrified to read Hemingway. Are you kidding? I would be terrified to hug a cat because they scratch and claw people all the time. Even their most beloved people, they scratch and claw all the time. I lost count of how many times in bookstores when I worked at a bookstore. The cat people would come in the morning and compare fresh scars with big smiles on their faces. Pure Stockholm Syndrome. So that would be the cat thing, definitely. Robert Lieberman says, any thoughts on Colleen McCullough's Rome series? Well, yes, quite a few thoughts, as you'd expect. Those of you who maybe don't know what we're talking about, Colleen McCullough, who I think be immortal forever as the author of The Thornbirds, took 20 years out of her writing career to write a huge series of huge historical novels set in ancient Rome. She originally wanted to chronicle in excruciating fictional detail the change of Rome from a republic to an empire. So she starts her series off with Marius, who's a Roman proto-dictator that casual readers of history won't know. Casual readers of Roman history will think, well, the Roman Republic existed and was just trundling along, and then Julius Caesar came along and ruined it, or fixed it, however you view it. But Julius Caesar came along and changed it into an empire with one emperor, basically a monarchy. And that's not true. Marius and there were a whole string of proto figures to Julius Caesar. Marius was one of them. Sulla was another. And Colleen McCullough starts First Man in Rome is about the first man in Rome noted in the title is Marius, and it goes on from there. And they're pretty leadenly written, and they have huge historical appendices that can be interesting depending on how much you're interested in Roman history. They're much more for people who are interested in Roman history than they are for people who are interested in the things that fiction can do. Because they hardly ever do those things. Every once in a while, probably once or twice in every book. But since the books are 800 pages long, that's not saying much. And in the original run of the series, I don't know if this is true in the reprints, but in the original run of the series, there was also Colleen McCullough's disastrous decision to include her own sketches of her main characters. Just ridiculous. Absolutely horrible. Better off to have had a kid do it. Or hire somebody to do it if you want these to be illustrated. But they are the sort of soup to nuts Roman historical fiction that, if you like that sort of thing, there certainly is a lot of Roman historical fiction that's like that. Then these are just the epitome of it. Come up here, baby me. Come on. All the way up. Go all the way up so your fans can see you. Oh no, Frida, don't curl up next to me. Baby, go up on the top of the couch. Your fans can't see you when you're standing there, and they want to. There you go. Oh. Oh. Now, prepare yourself, okay, because the bean just had a bit of food, which means at some point in this video or the future videos, there might be a discreet, petite little burp. It never bothers me, because when you have experienced basset hound burps, everything else seems very minor. But anyway, let's see here. Harrison Recht says, I'd be interested in your thoughts on the so-called War and Peace original version translated by Andrew Bromfield. Is it merely a gimmick, or is it a valuable companion to the version that we know? It's not a gimmick. It has a textual provenance, but it is more of an interesting companion. Saying, as the publisher almost tried to pitch it, until they realized how much affection is stored up in the reading world for War and Peace. The people who've read War and Peace love it. The publisher almost tried to say that this is the only real version of the book, and then they backed off from that. But the way you put it is better. It is a very interesting companion. If you can't get enough of War and Peace, and you've read maybe 2 English language translations, or maybe 3, the Bromfield is really interesting to do. Just not a replacement by any means. Let's see here. Nat Hat says, hey Steve, well done on the 11K. I'd love to know your thoughts on Steve Irwin. I'm pretty sure you can guess my thoughts on Steve Irwin. I know there's been a whole lot of sanctimony about how he tried to educate and how he was a passionate advocate for animal rights and for conservation and whatnot. But he did a vast amount of damage by trekking out into the wilderness, using maps and guides to find some rare or colorful animal, and then literally jumping on it and wrestling with it as if the natural world existed only for him to go and manhandle it for ratings. It drove me nuts. Every time I watched a show of his, it drove me nuts. Where he would be sort of stage whispering. He was always trying to play up how much danger he was in. He'd be sort of stage whispering that animal X is right past that brush, and it seems to be grazing, and we're downwind, so it doesn't know we're here. And I always wanted to say to the screen, well, okay, then that's it. You should stop. You're saying that in sight of you, or just through the screen of trees, is an animal completely at peace. But you're not going to stop there, because your goal is to change that. Your goal is to shatter its world experience and traumatize it for the length of time that you need for A and B roll footage. That maddened me. Watching him jump into a ditch in India in order to grab a python that was just minding its own business. And naturally, the less generous part of my brain immediately thought, well, you did that for the whole of a professional career. You made a professional career out of it, and you died of it. You died of it by manhandling an animal that you had no rights to touch or approach in any way, knowing that it was dangerous, and it killed you. Okay. You're going to run that risk for such a base and banal reason, then, this is the kind of end you can expect. My thoughts on Steve Irwin are not positive. The natural world wants nothing more from humans than to be left alone by it. I don't see the educational value in chasing a troop of baboons until a couple of the males round on you with aggression displays because you are threatening their families. I don't see the educational value in that at all. Anyway, here, let's stop with the rant and start again with part 2.